Disability Rights Arizona presents reasonable modifications for individuals with traumatic brain injuries in court proceedings. This video is intended to provide information about the rights of people with traumatic brain injury, or TBI, under the Americans with Disabilities Act, also known as the ADA, to ensure accessibility in state and local court proceedings. People with TBI have the right to reasonable modifications in state and local court proceedings, like status conferences, hearings, and trials, to ensure that the proceedings are accessible to them. Title II of the ADA requires that public entities like state and local governments provide reasonable modifications to people with disabilities where required to avoid discrimination on the basis of disability. It is important to note that the ADA does not apply to federal courts. It only applies to state, county, city, or justice courts. A reasonable modification, also called a reasonable accommodation, is any change in court policies, practices, or procedures to ensure full and equal participation of people with disabilities in court programs, services, and activities. Parties to a court proceeding, jurors, attorneys, witnesses, and members of the public have the right to reasonable modifications. Some examples of possible reasonable modifications during court proceedings for individuals with TBI include periodic rest breaks during hearings, extra time to process court instructions, extra time to process and answer questions, allowing a service animal, appearing for court proceedings virtually or telephonically rather than in person, and other modifications to policies, practices, or procedures that allow a person with TBI full and equal access to court programs and activities. It is important to remember that the court can deny a reasonable modification request if the modification would create an undue burden or fundamentally alter court programs and activities. How to request reasonable modifications. You can take the following steps to request reasonable modifications in court proceedings. These steps are general, and you should contact the clerk's office for the court handling your matter to get more information about your specific situation. Submit a reasonable modification request to the ADA coordinator for the court at least 2 weeks prior to any proceedings. For emergency or urgent requests, you should contact the ADA coordinator as soon as possible. Most courts have a reasonable accommodation or modification form you can complete and submit. If a specific form is not available, you can submit your request in writing. The written request should provide enough information about your disability for the ADA coordinator to make a decision on your reasonable modification request. The request should also include the specific modifications you are requesting. You should explain the connection between those modifications and your disability. If you do not know what reasonable modifications would be effective for you, you can request a meeting with the ADA coordinator to discuss the reasonable modifications that would be potentially effective. If you need reasonable modifications related to a judge's decision, you will need to file a motion with the judge assigned to your matter. For example, if a judge orders that a hearing be held in person only, the ability to attend the hearing virtually as a reasonable modification would need to be requested through a motion filed with the judge. If you need to disclose personal information in the motion, you may wish to see if you can file the motion under seal, which means it would be seen only by the parties and the judge, and not the public. If a reasonable modification request is denied, you have the right to file a grievance with the court. Most courts have an ADA grievance form available. Follow the instructions on the grievance form for how to submit your grievance, or ask the ADA coordinator about how to submit the grievance. When you file a grievance regarding the denial of reasonable modifications in an ongoing proceeding, if needed, you can file a motion with the judge requesting to stay the proceedings until your grievance is resolved. If the grievance is not resolved in your favor and you believe that the court discriminated against you based on your disability, you can file a complaint with the U.S. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. You can also contact a private attorney about filing a lawsuit. You You can get more information about the complaint process at www.ada.gov/file-a-complaint. To access more information about requesting reasonable accommodations, visit Disability Rights Arizona's website at disabilityrightsaz.org or call 602-274-6287. The information presented is intended to be used for informational purposes only and is not legal advice. If you have specific questions or want legal advice, please contact a qualified attorney in your state.